Uh, this is a topic I do want to touch on, because obviously you've managed to successfully close a round. Did you close it during COVID?
So part of the round was before, and part of it was during COVID. Yeah, we had to pivot like that narrative, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a feather in your cap. That's a great job, Christian. Closing around during COVID. That's some serious business. So, talk about when did you come across the point of, look, I need funding? First of all. Secondly, what did the company look like at that point? What was your vision? And then how did you go about taking the methodical steps to seeking out, where do I start and how do I even go about getting this thing called funding? Where do I meet these super friendly angels and VCs? Where do they live?
So one of the best things that I did that made me realize I needed funding, one was go to the Techstars hackathon, and then hackathons after that, where there's not so much the hack that they're concentrating on, but equally the business case as well, and figuring out, okay, like if I'm really going to start thinking about, how am I going to afford the salaries and the technology, and how do I price everything, and who do I need in order to help me to price the engineering work and all that kind of stuff. Like the initial hackathon is what made me realize that, I can't just, build a product with a team of guys that I'm friends with and hope users come and then, have a Snapchat or a Facebook story. Like, that's not how it works. The second thing as well is, off the back of the hackathon, I heard of, incubators and accelerators and pre-accelerators and all of these different frameworks that help entrepreneurs figure out and learn what VCs are looking for. So I ended up going to this pre-accelerator part of the NDRC. So this was the NDRC is the was it National Digital Research Center of Ireland or something like that. They were hosting these classes where they would teach entrepreneurs that had good experience and good ideas but didn't really have a team. They'll teach them basically what VCs are looking for and what things you need to prove in order to validate your idea. So in a long answer, I was basically seeking different knowledge groups and knowledge sources as to how to raise money. You won't figure it out just from looking on the internet, but in my experience, you need to go out and find people that have raised, start speaking to friendly VCs that are scouting for future entrepreneurs at these events. Like that's what I did, and it did take longer than I'd like to admit in order to kind of learn what I needed to learn.
And that's a great piece of advice, Christian, just to kind of add my experience onto that as well. Like, you'll find that depending on which industry or niche your business is in, whether it's a SaaS company, whether it's a mobile app company, whether it's something else, the VCs who operate in your market will have very specific criteria and metrics which they're looking for before you will even get your foot into the door to present. So it's very important, like Christian said, that you want to get out. You want to get out there and meet these VCs and ask them over a coffee, like, if I come back in 2 years' time, what do my metrics need to look like for you to be interested? Or if I come back in 6 months' time, what does it need to look like for you to be interested? And then go and work towards that.
Yeah, exactly. And have a one. I remember the first deck that I made. Actually, this is why I know so much about Airbnb. They shared a deck years ago on LinkedIn. I think it's their first startup pitch deck, and I was like, oh, okay, this must be the way that I build a deck. So I built a deck, showed the VC, your first deck will be absolute crap. It will just suck. And then you just need to reiterate on it until you get the right one that will get you into enough doors. So that was kind of a strand of education that I went on. Another thing as well, and to be honest,
sorry, Christian, just coming back onto that, the deck becomes easy to make once you understand what the VCs want. The only reason your first deck becomes shitty is because you're doing it from what you think is important, not from what they think is important. So as soon as you network and you've spoken to them, you're just telling them what they've told you they want to see. So it packs itself around.
It sounds kind of simple, but you're going to get to a point where you're going to talk to enough people and VCs, and you're going to get asked so many questions that it helps you reiterate your deck to the perfect deck, where it will get you in the door, and then there's a next layer of questions for like the next part of that journey, which will be how to scale and how to generate revenue and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, outside of learning how to make a good deck, I actually realized this really late, actually, just before I raised, because before we initially raised and we had the POC and MVP and things like that, we basically shifted all of our concentration onto making the first pound. So rather than concentrating on the bigger deals that will take months and months to execute. Just concentrate on making the first pound with your MVP. If you can do that and then have a good deck, and then increase your sales ability to sell the dream. If you have those things, you should be able to raise. And I guess after learning how to build a good deck, and I had the team, it was just figuring out, okay, how do I make that first pound? What do I need to build? How many customers do I need to talk to? Those are the main things that I concentrated on.
Cool. And before you headed down the VC route, how did you calculate or come to the figure of how much you need to raise? How did you work out, this is how much I need to do the next step? What was your thinking and rationale behind that? One of the key things, obviously, is going to be, you mentioned there, what does a team need to look like that I'm going to build out? And obviously, given your background at Facebook and Google, were you of the mindset that I need to hire the same caliber of engineers I saw? Or were you more focused of, probably won't be able to afford the pay packages that Facebook and Google are. I may need to go for a tier down in terms of developers until we can afford it. What was your thinking around that?
So my thinking around that was so the funding round. People know that we funded, but they don't know the amount. So that's going to get released later. So I can't.
No, you don't need to mention the amount.
but
you tell me later.
Yeah, definitely. The first thing is whatever your first figure is, it will be wrong, and you'll probably need to double it or maybe triple it. That is just how things work. The way that I came up with the first figure, which was I think it was like 250K or something, it was like way too small, is when it comes to the and I learned this in the pre-accelerator as well. And sorry, a caveat to that. I asked a good friend of mine who called Ed, who raised money internally within BT Ventures. I was like, okay, what is the financial model that you used, as in the numbers behind the story? What did you use in order to persuade BT to give you that investment? He gave me a blank version of that spreadsheet, and that gave me an idea of all the variables I needed to consider. And I rebuilt that bloody spreadsheet like 12 times or something. But it gives you an idea of like every single variable you need to think about.
So we're talking, in your case, server costs, developers, recruits, office space, other bits and pieces ad hoc, just for
office space. Like you don't need to worry about like tax and retaining that, things like that. But all the main expenditure of your staff, fixed costs. If you scale from one customer to 100,000 customers, so you can get the idea of the unit economics, you basically map all of that out. And then you start tweaking it. So the forecast is almost like a sensitivity or a scenario test, right? Where the way I structured it is you've got a list of assumptions in one tab, and all of those assumptions are mapped into the forecast. And then you start tweaking things around based on what you find out about your customers. And then you extend that to maybe a 3 to 4 years. And then in every single year, you'll obviously make adjustments to your assumptions based on the growth of the company. So that is what I did. It sounds long because it kind of is in the early days, but it's something that will really help you figure out how much money you need to raise. And in terms of the key benchmark, it's 18 months, like what will, based on what you assume is going to happen over the next 3 years. In your first 18 months, how much money will you need with zero revenue? So once you come up with the forecast, you find that number, and then usually you'll have to times it by 2 or 3.
Got it. So you worked off the basis of, I need 18 months worth of runway. What does that look like once I start building out that team, given the unit economics?
Yeah, and pretty much every VC will tell you to at least have that calculation.